Just go to your
Good
sides.
afternoon, everybody. Will do. Can you hear me okay? Everything, I sound okay? Mic is close enough? All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. My name is Phaedra Boinodiris, and I'm a member of ITEM's Academy of Technology. I incubated our first serious games practice here at IBM over 8 years ago. It's amazing how quickly that swath of time has passed. And there have been so many changes and such an incredible journey and evolution of serious games, gamification, what we paid attention to, what we've prioritized over time. And I want to walk you through instead of going back in time and really reiterating where we've been and what we've hashed out, I want to talk more about what we see now as key drivers and trends. I want to start off by giving you a snapshot with regards to the huge data deluge that people throughout industries are experiencing, right? They're swimming in a wash of data. And I'll give you just a quick backstory to kind of explain how is it that this deluge of data that people are experiencing connects to serious games and what we're doing. So about a month ago, I had a small local government agency reach out to me. This small local government agency, they managed all the EMS technology, police technology, the school system technology, educations, right, for that entire region. And they reached out and they said, hey, would you be interested in coming in and help us interview our very first data scientist? So I was kind of scratching thinking, why do you want me to help you interview your first data scientist? But I go along with it, and I'm at a table, and they had about 5 different interviewees, and I was the only outsider. And I was thinking to myself, this is really strange. But then I started to hear the questions. And at first, the questions were around things like, what's your best practice? So what kinds of tools do you like to use to curate your data? But then the questions started to have this kind of attack to it. They would say things like, you realize that the data that you're going to be curating for this region has huge socioeconomic impacts for the citizens of this area. So how is it that you plan to curate and relay this data? What's the kind of experiences that you're going to have around this data in order to get people to really understand it? Because indeed, it might affect which zip code they decide to live in. It might affect who they vote for. It might drive really important behaviors. And so this is the kinds of questions. Sort of stared back with this blank stare saying, PowerPoint? And it was really interesting. And I was telling the government agents afterwards, I said, you're really looking for a Neil Ross Tyson. You're looking for this, amazing scientist who has also the ability to clearly communicate a vision and really be able to drive behaviors. And they were saying, we're really looking to be able to hire a data scientist who really understands serious games, motivational design, because what they're about, what they really want to do is, in effect, create a people-centric approach toward design. Not just technology-centric, just about the numbers, but really, in effect, create an experience where you get people to care, where they understand, here's what this means to me. And the words that I remember leaving with in my mind was this concept of making big data actionable. And I'm seeing this kind of concept again and again. So really this space of serious games has evolved from let me use games as an engaging way to teach somebody something, to this concept of how do we actually get people to care and making data science actionable. Enter in the confluence of artificial intelligence and play. And the picture on the right is actually a snapshot taken several years ago when IBM's artificial intelligence named Watson competed against people on Jeopardy. So there are many, many examples that we've seen in science fiction of artificial intelligence and play and sort of what it means when it intersects. I don't know how many of you have been watching the series called Black Mirror. If you haven't, I highly, highly recommend it. Maybe not episode 1 because that was really kind of gross, but the other ones are fantastic. It's kind of like the Twilight Zone for our times. It's a dystopian view of technology and how it might very well affect our society and, in fact, unravel our society. But there's one episode in particular called Playtest. And it's very interesting to see how AI and play are depicted here, where in effect, due to an interlink directly into a person's brain, not only can the game upload data into the person's brain where it really feels like the person is living within the game, but also it's extracting information from a person's brain in order to hyper optimize the gameplay. So that's one example. Another one is from an Ender's Game. So in this game, the snapshot is actually taken from a game that Ender was playing that was used not only to assess whether he was really good recruiting fodder, but also to be able to glean a lot more insight as to the way Ender would make certain kinds of decisions. So that's the second example. Now, of course, Star Trek is a wonderful utopian view of technology. It's sort of I like to think of it as the antithesis of Black Mirror. And in fact, Star Trek is actually what first inspired the brains behind the creator of Watson. He envisioned that the way that the IBM's artificial intelligence would work would be through natural language, just as how the members of the Starship Enterprise communicate with a computer, right? So, but this example that I'm showing here is the holodeck, right? It's sort of virtual reality, but on steroids, but it also uses a significant amount of AI. So now, away from science fiction, we've, at least the folks on this phone call or this webinar know, because I recognize a lot of the names here, we already know that games can be incredibly adept at explaining complex time and again. And in fact, we know also that games can be very powerful instruments of change. They can do all of the things on this list. And I know this because we've done it and we've seen it, right? Whether it's using games to teach or using games to assess people or crowdsource solutions, onboarding, solving problems. And as I mentioned the last time I did a webinar here, the real holy grail that we're seeing from more and more organizations has been around this concept of using games to transform cultures, right? How is it that you get people to think differently, change their mindsets about an organization or a group that they belong to? I've pasted in the chat area a series of, I think it's 5 or 6 different videos. So if you could scroll up, take a look. I can't really stream the YouTube videos well over this webinar. It comes across choppy. But for each video that I outline here, I want to make sure that you take the time to look at the videos that I'm describing to you. This first video called Grab Game that was made by a business partner and friend of mine, where in effect, he created a game. When he made this game, it was many, many years ago. He was in his early 20s, and he hired a whole group of organizational psychologists and behavioral psychologists. And in effect, it's a casual game such that in less than 8 minutes, you're sort of building this tower of toothpicks to reach this glowing orb at the top. But every time you hit sort of these markers on the side, part of your infrastructure crumbles. In less than 8 minutes, it will assess what kind of critical thinking style you have, right? And if everybody on this call played this game, it would actually optimize teams for us. It would say, okay, based on how each person approaches a problem or what their critical thinking style is, here's what the optimal team might look like. And I wanted to make sure you saw this, because what I thought was most compelling about this is a fantastic way of assessing a specific kind of soft skill without ever asking a question. It's not like it's asking me, what my critical thinking style is, or how I approach problem solving, or do I like A, B, or C, or D better. It's actually having me play through it, and it determines when I have a failure, how quickly do I shift to another strategy, and how different is the strategy that I shift to. And in fact, we had a whole team of cyber range warriors in a room playing this game, and every single cyber range warrior except for their leader had the same categorization, the same profile. And the team left the room thinking, actually, this is not a really good idea. We need to have not only a diversity in terms of who we are as people and where we come from and what we look like, but also diversity of thought. This second example was also made by a business partner and friend of mine, Dr. Chris Hazard, who's spoken at Serious Play before, and he has made a cyber strategy game. This is a game that is extremely sophisticated and gives you a sense of how is it that you might be able to change decisions over time, optimize your network in order to make it more resilient to different kinds of attacks. Highly recommend you take a peek at that. When thinking, and this is to Evo's question or comment earlier today, when thinking about making any of these kind of applications, it is critically important, especially when you're thinking about how do you make data science actionable and getting people to care. It's critically important that you spend the majority of your time thinking about what is your audience. And I cannot stress this enough. Do not make the mistake of jumping to design, of jumping to implementation, of jumping to technology without doing this homework first. And what I have found has worked really well has been by walking through a design thinking lab or a design thinking workshop. And I do this with students, I do this with startups at incubators, I've done this with all kinds of different kinds of clients. It doesn't take a lot of time, but it is so useful. And what you do when you launch one of these design thinking labs, the first part of your lab has to focus on the personas. So who exactly is the audience that you're trying to attract or you're trying to change their behavior? And when you do the persona work, you're actually not only doing demographic level detailing, you're actually figuring out what is it that influences this person? What are they afraid of? What is it that drives them? Right? What do they care about? What kinds of apps do they have on their mobile device? Right? It's fascinating, especially the more and more you drill down deep into this persona, the more revelations there are to creating what we call a journey map that really drives that particular persona group. Right? So how do you get them to not only learn about your application, but how is it that you can then get them to use it not once, but multiple times to really have it be something that they engage with quite often? And then how is it that you can get them to drive to become an ambassador where they're telling their friends and they're telling others? So it's really this design thinking concept is a way of optimizing engagement. But while you're doing this, you're fleshing out, here's what the technological requirements have to look like. Here's what it's got to connect to. And now that I know that, here's my stakeholder map. Here's the different business partners I need to look at. Here's my distribution plan. It's so interesting to see how many other aspects of the project spin out from just this kind of an exercise. So again, critically important. So now I'm going to switch to the next part of my my presentation to you about 4 major areas where we're focused on artificial intelligence: language, data, insight, speech, and vision. So starting off with language. So again, these are 4 aspects for AI with regards to IBM's Watson. Here's an example with regards to language. So our AI has the ability to mine structured and unstructured data sets in order to find patterns. So in this example, right, we've got the ability to mine structured and unstructured data coming out of Twitter. So we actually worked with a major fashion brand called Marchesa, and we sewed in these little LED lights into one of their beautiful gowns. And whenever someone would tweet about this big fashion show, the Met Gala, and they would express an emotion through their tweet, the dress lights would change colors. So if I said, "Oh my God, I'm so disappointed. I'm stuck in traffic. I can't make it to the Met Gala," right? The LED lights might shine blue. Basically show how is it not only you can integrate or intersect fashion with artificial intelligence, but also this sense of gleaning social sentiment. How is it you mine social sentiment about a particular group or event or persona or etc. So back to the world of Star Trek, another example with regards to language is, let's say you're making a game that has a very rich history. Like, so imagine on the board of the Enterprise, you can ask the shipboard computer not only questions about what's happening on the ship diagnostics, but you can also ask it questions about the history of the planet you're just passing. So you can similarly train our AI so that it understands the backstory of a particular IP in this case, right? The Star Trek IP, what has happened with regards to the history, but also I can access it so that the kind of dialogue I can have with it could be at a diagnostic level. Like, here's what's happening on my ship right now, for example. The next video I would like for you to take a peek at is Medical Minecraft. This is a project that we did with a high school for disadvantaged teens out in Texas, where in effect we created a recipe for the classroom to follow, where they were able to integrate with Watson from their reskinned version of Minecraft. And I think what's extra compelling about this, and what I'll talk about at the conference in more detail, is actually the culture change that was needed within the classroom in order to really embrace an entrepreneurial model, an entrepreneurial way of thinking. And this Medical Minecraft story has really taken off and is in fact scaling globally. We've got the teacher that we were working with on here, David Conover, now working with teachers all around the world, intra-classroom projects, especially around maker spaces. It's been really, really cool to see. This next example is around data insights. So I know many of you are familiar with the concept of the words gameplay balancing, right? I need to serve up a level of a game that is highly optimized and engaged for my users. So I'm going to glean as much information as I can about a user in order to determine what's the right level of gameplay that will keep them engaged, right? The concept of flow. So we're able to do this now with our artificial intelligence. So we're actually doing this with Sesame Street because they're creating educational apps, game-based learning, and we're using an AI to be able to assess, okay, what skill set is this particular player on? What kinds of experiences do they prefer over others? And now you're serving up levels of games that are highly optimized for them. So in essence, you're tackling what we call pathways. This next area, vision, I mentioned the ability to mine structured and unstructured data sets. So in this case, this is imagery, right? So we can train Watson to be able to recognize pictures of things. In fact, we trained Watson to be able to recognize images of tumors that are cancerous versus non-cancerous. So now this can be used to help augment diagnoses. But imagine if you have a camera and you've got it, sort of trained on a child who's building something, right, out of building blocks, and they're starting to build what looks like two towers or potentially two legs, you could have your AI ask the question, hey, are you building a robot? Are you building a giraffe? What in other words, it might be able to sense or give some suggestions as to what it is the person is trying to build. With regards to image recognition, some other examples is, did you know that drones oftentimes are taken down by birds of prey? So you'll suddenly have this raptor or a bald eagle going and tackling a drone might be too close to a nest. So you can have a drone with a camera, a smart camera, that recognizes which bird of prey is actually trying to tackle it, and it will play a sound that is especially terrifying for that particular bird type, right? So again, the power of how is it that you can blend image recognition. In this case, in this video, you're seeing sort of the emotions expressed on somebody's face. How is it that I can merge that with artificial intelligence, again, to curate highly customized experiences? Now moving on to speech, right? So we're able to mine patterns from speech and able to do things like guess, not only what's the age, what's the context of the speech, what is the person trying to say, and in what kind of way are they saying it? What emotion are they expressing? What tone are they expressing? Are they sad? Are they happy? These kinds of things, but also be able to gauge even what age the person might be. So in this video, this is an example of how we've merged intelligence with regards to the speech recognition into the world of VR. So again, you might be able to be in a VR environment and be able to call out objects that are actually within an embedded library and see it live within your VR experience. But it's actually not that I'm as excited about as sort of the next generation of that, which is something called an empathetic conversion bot. So you can imagine, you know what a chat bot is, right? You're training it in a particular kind of dialogue. Now imagine you can train a chatbot to have a particular kind of dialogue, but I'm gathering data about my end user to gauge what tone are they using. Are they mad? What are they feeling? I'm able to guess their age. I'm able to see them, right? I'm able to get data from their IoT sensor device. So I can know their heart rate. There's so much information I can be getting about an end user, which now I can tailor and curate something highly specialized and curated just for them. So you want to talk about engagement, you want to talk about motivating somebody. The more you know about a person, the more you can start to structure experiences which have high meaning and personalization. So we have Dr. Mutusia, who's on this call, and I have a friend that's building a disaster preparedness game for kids, right? So imagine it's able to do all these things. You've got an empathetic conversation bot. The kid has a cell phone and is scanning the room, right? And it's able to know, here's where the exits are in the room that this kid is in. Here's the emotion that this kid is expressing. Here's the question that they're asking me right now. And I'm going to run through different kinds of what-if scenarios. Again, it's tremendous to see. This is an example. And again, remember those sci-fi examples that seem so far out? Not so far out, right? Here's an example of how we took old toy, Hungry Hippos. I don't know if you guys remember it, right? You're clicking on the lever and you're trying to get your hippos to eat the marbles. Imagine if instead of you pressing on the lever, the way that you're getting your hippos to eat the marbles is actually through a brainwave monitoring device. We got one super cheap, like less than $20 used online, right? We connected Arduinos to the different hippos such that the way you get your hippos to eat the marbles is by going into a semi-meditative state. So the more you can remain calm and lower your heart rate, the more marbles your hippo will eat. Why is this cool? This is cool because remember that classroom who was doing the medical Minecraft project with us, disadvantaged teens? That class is taking this on. They're developing prototypes and they're actually showing it off and piloting it to kids at the Dell Children's Hospital, kids going through chemo. So now, again, hyper entrepreneurial model plus makerspace plus gameplay, and they're piloting it at a children's hospital, or games for good, games for change. Again, incredible to see how you use different concepts together in order to really affect change. This next example, I think it's my last one, is a game that you get to play. You go to thesuspect.com. It's one of my links. And with this one, it actually merges tone analyzer as well as something called personality insights as part of the gameplay. So you're interviewing a murder suspect, and you're trying to figure out how do you get in his head. The game is assessing what kind of personality you have, what your tone is, and in effect, it's weaving all of this psychology into the gameplay. So you're welcome to play that out to get a sense. I didn't want to leave this section, especially around EdTech and education, without mentioning blockchain. And if you guys aren't familiar or haven't heard about blockchain, think of this. This is the underpinning technology, a hyper ledger, if you will, that underpins cryptocurrency or Bitcoin. But when thinking about reinventing EdTech, one of the things that I'm learning more about and incubating is this concept of having a blockchain-enabled skills ledger for EdTech. So a lot of us on this call, on this webinar now, have been focused on EdTech, or we're creating serious games, creating applications for learning. But what I find interesting is if we can have a platform that is not only able to lock and unlock different kinds of certifications and manage it over across the internet in a hyperledger, but actually have the value of these certifications changing over time, I think that's very interesting. So you might have, for example, a soldier in the military who's learning about cyber defense, and when they leave to go join the industry or business sector, they want that certification to have value. They want that certification to have meaning for industry. So having something like a blockchain-enabled skills ledger, I think, could be quite disruptive in terms of the concept of democratizing in this way. So I think that's something for us all to look at. So in summary, I'm really keen on this concept of thinking about this space, not only in terms of being engaging, optimizing engagement, motivational design, but underneath the covers, making data science actionable so people care, right? I think there's a lot of interest in this space, a lot of movement. People are using different words. They may not be using the word serious games. They may not be using the words gamification even. But keep this concept in mind, because as more and more of industry invests money in data science, they're going to be looking for this. They're going to be looking for ways of actually creating experiences that resonate with people. So I hope that has been helpful to you. I've got a lot of recipes online for a bunch of these things around maker spaces or the IoT sensor devices, the tone analyzer, how to make your own empathetic conversation bot. I've got a bunch of them. I'm happy to share the links with you so you can try it out and just play around with it. And I'm happy to take any questions you might have. Thanks for your time today.
Any questions before we sign off? Happy to have you ask any questions.
I do have a blog. I have a couple of places where I've been posting, and I'm happy to share the links with you. I'll copy and paste it into this chat. My pleasure. Thank you for coming, Susan. Thank you, Evo. Pleasure. I actually just finished a blog on the intersection of play and AI. I've also got a one on engagement and an education. So I'll send it all to you so you can see.